Good morning. This video is not going to be very long. It's just a short addendum to my previous video on the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And the information in this video is the result of the conversation I had last night with Master Astrologer David Cochran and some others. And that discussion caused me to realize some additional details that apply to this assassination attempt. So let me see if I can share my screen here. As usual, it will take me just a few seconds to get rid of some panels so that I can see what I'm doing. And I think we're ready to go. So this one is called Astrological Resonance and the Trump Shooting. Now, what do I mean by astrological resonance? Well, that's the term I use when planets in the sky are making the same configuration that exists in the horoscope of either an individual, a country, or some institution. When what it is in the horoscope of that individual or country, well, when that matches something which is currently happening in the sky, then you have incredible resonance between the two. And that can act as a trigger of certain events. Now, let me show you a couple of examples. Here is the horoscope for the horrendous attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th, 2024. And what most astrologers will focus on is this strong square between Pluto and Mars, which is intensified by Mars's conjunction with the lunar nodal axis, and then the moon, roughly in opposition to Pluto and square Mars, that is acting as a trigger. So this can be a moment when violence just explodes. However, there's something else going on that not all astrologers have picked up on. So let's look at two wheels where we have the Hamas attack on the left and Israel on the right. And notice that at the time that Hamas was attacking, you had an opposition between the Sun and Chiron, and both of these planets were pretty close to the lunar nodal axis. This is a little wide for what we might usually think of as a conjunction, but if we were looking at eclipses, this would certainly be close enough. So this Sun-Chiron opposition, it's close enough to this lunar nodal axis to be intensified. Now, if you look at Israel's chart, you have the exact same thing. You have the Sun in opposition to Chiron, and that opposition is close to the lunar nodal axis. This creates incredible resonance between the transits at that moment and what happened to Israel. The transits at this moment, keep in mind, they impact the whole world, but not the whole world experiences the horrific consequences that Israel did. So when you take things like this kind of astrological resonance into account, you can understand why the transits at that moment so profoundly affected a particular individual or country. Now, here's another example. September 11th, at the time of the attack in New York City, Pluto was in opposition to Saturn, and the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius were involved. And Saturn can certainly represent infrastructure, buildings, and Pluto can represent destruction. So this is a very clear astrological signature for the destruction of infrastructure. But again, the question is, why did this happen in New York City? Why not somewhere else? Well, actually, it did happen at the Pentagon, and the chart for the United States of America was also being affected, but we won't get into that now. Clearly, the biggest impact was on New York City. But why there? Why not San Francisco? Why not some other country? Well, it all comes down to astrological resonance once again. Here we have the chart for 9/11 on the left, the chart for New York City on the right. And if you look at the chart for New York City, this is a chart for when it was incorporated with all boroughs. And in this chart, what do we see? Again, we see an opposition between Pluto and Saturn. And again, the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius are involved. So this created incredible resonance with the transits at the time of that attack. Okay, now let's move on to the Trump shooting. Uh, that happened at 6:11 p.m. in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, 2024. Some have refined this to 6 hours, 11 minutes, and 30 seconds. But 6:11, that's close enough, I believe. Okay, now there's a lot of stuff going on in this chart. We have Pluto in opposition to Venus. We have the Sun and Moon making a T-square with Chiron. But the thing that I think astrologers pick up the most on is this strong conjunction between Mars and Uranus. This can be very explosive. This can be a sudden explosion of anger or aggression. Furthermore, many have pointed out that Mars and Uranus were also conjunct the fixed star Algol, and I don't work a whole lot with fixed star astrology, so I can't vouch for how effective fixed star astrology is, but I will note that the meaning assigned to Algol, it usually represents some very big catastrophe or unfortunate event that happens, and particularly things that involve the head or beheading, because Arabic astrologers referred to Algol as the demon's head. So, Mars conjunct Uranus, that's ominous enough. Conjunct Algol, that might make it even worse. Okay, now, if we look to see how the transits were impacting Trump at that moment, well, Mars and Uranus, they were conjunct the cusp of his 10th house, his midheaven, and they were square his ascendant and his natal Mars. At the very least, I was expecting him to be very angry this day. He could also be very excitable and out of control. That is what Uranus does. Uh, he could also be accident prone on this day, but violence is another possibility. I wasn't expecting that so much because the president is allegedly well protected by the Secret Service, and political violence is it's not that common in American politics. It happens, but it's certainly not an everyday occurrence. But it did happen on this day. And with Mars and Uranus conjunct his midheaven, that's one of the angles of the chart. The angles are the ascendant, midheaven, descendant, and the nadir at the bottom of the chart. And whenever a planet, a transiting planet, is conjunct an angle, it can not only affect that particular house, it's going to be more energized in general. Things on angles are going to be stronger. So there was certainly a heightened probability or risk for all of those things I just mentioned, including an act of violence. a sudden act of violence against Donald Trump. Okay, now this is a chart for Thomas Crooks, the shooter. We don't know the exact time that he was born, so I've just set this up for 12 noon, and I've set it up as a generic chart with 0 degrees Aries rising. Some sources on the internet say that he was born in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. He certainly grew up in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, but even if he was actually born elsewhere, that is not going to make any difference uh, with regard to what I'm going to show you, because the planets involved that I'm going to take a look at, they don't move all that quickly, and they certainly weren't moving all that quickly on the day that Thomas Crooks was born. Okay, but take a look at this. These are two wheels. The one on the left is for the Trump shooting. The one on the right is a generic noon birth chart for Thomas Crooks in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. And the transit chart for the Trump shooting, you have, of course, that strong Mars-Uranus conjunction. But look at this. In Thomas Crooks' chart, what do you have on that day? The same Mars-Uranus conjunction. That creates an incredible resonance between the transits at the time of the shooting and Thomas Crooks. Furthermore, on the day that Thomas Crooks was born, Mars was not moving as fast as usual. It was only moving about maybe a third as fast as it usually does. It was coming to a standstill. That means that this energy, which can manifest as anger, aggression, it wasn't a quick flash in the pan. It wasn't something you experience and then you move on. This is something that just sort of sits there and stews until it boils over and then explodes suddenly because of the conjunction with Uranus. Okay, so again, we have this incredible resonance between the transits at that moment that Trump was shot and the birth chart of Thomas Crooks. But look at this last chart. This is really incredible. This is a tri-wheel where I have Donald Trump's chart on the inside, Thomas Crooks' chart in the middle, and the transits at the time of the shooting on the outside. And this is just amazing to me. We've got Mars and Uranus up here, conjunct Donald Trump's midheaven, square his Mars. We've seen that. But look at where the Mars-Uranus conjunction for Thomas Crooks falls. It's very strongly conjunct uh, the descendant in Donald Trump's chart, opposite the ascendant, opposing Trump's natal Mars, and it too is being squared by this transiting Mars-Uranus conjunction. Furthermore, the lunar nodes in Thomas Crook's chart are conjunct this midheaven nadir 10th house, 4th house axis in Donald Trump's chart, and Thomas Crook's ascendant is conjunct the cusp of the 4th house, the nadir, in the chart of Donald Trump. This is about as close as I think you get as astrology to something which is fated or preordained. Uh, it looks like it was almost inevitable that Thomas Crooks would come into conflict with Donald Trump in a violent way. And it was just waiting for something like this particular kind of Mars-Uranus conjunction uh, to literally pull the trigger. When this conjunction came also into conjunction with the midheaven and Donald Trump's chart, that set things off. And with Mars Uranus in opposition to Trump's ascendant and Mars and Thomas Crook's ascendant squaring this, and Thomas Crook's lunar nodes conjuncting this 10th house, 4th house axis in Trump's chart, really intensifying the energies. Wow. Again, as I say, this really looks almost like fate, something almost unavoidable. Okay, well, let me stop sharing here. All right, I'm back. So that's the end of this short presentation. This really shows you the astrological resonance that was present at the time that Thomas Crooks attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. And we saw that that same kind of resonance was there at the time of the attack by Hamas on Israel. And it was also there when New York City was attacked on September 11th, 2001. So, as I often point out, in astrology, most astrological effects, particularly when there's just a single factor involved, most of those astrological effects tend to be fairly weak. If they weren't weak, we would never be able to exercise our free will and overcome them. But every now and then, you get, astrologically speaking, a perfect storm. You get several factors combining to make this perfect storm where the outcome seems almost inevitable. And that is the case with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump by this young man, Thomas Crooks. Okay, well, that's it for today. I hope you found that somewhat interesting and enlightening. And I hope you enjoy me for more videos. But for now, I'll just say so long and be well.